Boom. NFL Week 9 covers football betting countdown with the man himself, LVP. I'm Adam Chernoff, and Week 8 continued to make this, in my opinion, the most difficult thing that I have ever done in betting. I don't know if you feel the same, but this is bloody difficult week to week to try get these top 5 consensus picks correct. I said it was more difficult than trying to bet a new sport blind. Are you feeling the same way?
It's just very, very difficult on Thursdays, but you know what? I'm looking on Saturdays, and I'm not faring much better on Saturdays either this year for whatever the reason is. Every week there's just shockers on there, and it's just surprising. I was surprised Cincinnati was on there last week.
Very surprised. And I think a lot of people were surprised to see the result of that game, especially when it comes to Survivor. 871 of them, to be precise, ended up having the Bengals go down, eliminated from Survivor. But then there were a number of other little ones. The Chargers, 38 people, Falcons, 13, Cardinals, Browns, Bucks combined for another 10. In total, we're down to 1,188 people left in Circa Survivor heading into Week 9. That was the first time since the Giants Saints that we saw a favorite or more than a touchdown lose. Most shocking result of the season, fair to say?
Well, considering I bet Cincinnati, yes, I wasn't expecting that.
More surprising to you, how many people were on them in the million contest, or how many people lost with them in Survivor?
Oh, I think, well, that wasn't a bad pick for Survivor. That was a tough one to dodge, but I was surprised at how many people were on in millions. I may have used them. I can't remember anymore, but that's a tough pill to swallow when you're laying double digits like that.
You mentioned it last week. The Bengals were the first double-digit favorite all season to be picked in the million contest through 8 weeks. Up to that point, no double digits make it. So we were both equally, I think, shocked by that. But now this week, as we sort of I'm willing to close the door on Week 8 very, very quickly. We'll put that in the rearview mirror. But
I was scared out of my mind. I was losing everything. I had a high volume day, and I was losing everything at one point. And I'm like, oh no.
Let's put it in the rearview mirror for Week 8. We're going forward to Week 9, and I think it makes sense to stick with those double-digit favorites. And we're picking the consensus here. We're not giving it our picks, and we haven't seen any Thursday night game get enough volume. So I think when it comes to these double-digit favorites, we can probably put the Colts-Jets game on the side and sort of avoid it. But then looking forward to Sunday, we've got the Cowboys -10 at home to the Broncos. Dak Prescott will be back under center for Dallas. We got Buffalo at -15 against the Jacksonville Jags, who you're lower on than almost any other team in the NFL. There's another team from Florida I think you're a little bit lower on. Either of those double-digit favorites on Sunday potentially catching your eye as one that can make the top 5 consensus?
You know, I'm hearing other people thinking the way I've been thinking. I've excluded these double digits in the NFL for years, and I went back and started researching, and I'm putting them back into the rotation because the difference between the haves and the have-nots is starting to border on something like we see in the NCAA. And we just can't arbitrarily dismiss these double-digit favorites anymore because some teams are worse than ever and some teams are appearing better than ever. And the recent studies showed that these double digits of 14 or more were covering at a 70% rate the last time I looked. So that's what piqued my interest and made me go back and say, yeah, I think I do need to put these in the rotation again.
So the interesting thing about this for me, from my ratings perspective, is I work on a 0 to 100 scale, and usually the extremes are 80 and 20 either way. If a team is playing at a rating I have higher than 80, that's the elite teams that we've seen in the last decade and a half that I've been doing this. And then on the flip side, if you're below 20, I mean, that's the bottom of the barrel. I've got 5 teams below 20, and 2 of them, Houston and Jacksonville, at a 10. And that's as low as I've had teams in years. Just one of them gets that low. Like I'm thinking back to the really bad Lions teams, some of the really bad Dolphins teams right when I was getting started 10, 15 years ago. And like I'm putting these guys on that level. And we're seeing multiple of them. And I think it's only going to get worse. I mean, we were texting and saying, we're going into week 9. We're at the midway point of the season. And it feels like things haven't really settled in yet. Like their divide keeps expanding week after week after week. It's getting a little bit unusual for me anyway.
Well, yeah, and I think you're seeing a lot of talented people that do traditionally win, not doing well so far this season. I'm not doing that well this season. It's disappointing, and I'm seeing people that traditionally don't do well doing well. Also, the books lost 3 weeks in a row. Many of them did. So it is an unusual season, and we're kind of waiting for it to settle in, like you said. And it doesn't feel settled in. It feels there still seems to be too few games every week that you can really just sit there and say, okay, my numbers are spot on here. I'm looking forward to this game. I know what's going on here.
So back to the top 5 consensus here. I'm willing to take Dallas, Denver out of the equation on this one, I think, but I do believe we have to consider Buffalo laying the very big number against Jacksonville, just because I don't think many people are going to disagree saying that Buffalo is a top 2 to 3 team in the league. I think a lot of people have them, as the market is showing them, as a Super Bowl favorite, leading the way. And when it comes to Jacksonville, I don't know anyone making a case for them being anything other but a bottom 3 team. So I think we're looking at really as wide of a gap as we can have. And you consider what we saw Arizona against Houston, that got out to north of 20. The Rams in a similar situation against Houston, that ultimately closed 17, and we're seeing Buffalo at 15. Like these big numbers take money seemingly every week this season. Is Buffalo a fringe top 5 here?
Yeah, actually, I thought you were going to try to exclude it, and I was going to say, I don't know about that one. I think people let's keep that in the rotation for now.
Same page there with you for sure. So we'll put it on the fringe top 5 in terms of just like sure things that we've talked about. And there haven't been many of them. I don't think we've looked at the card this week or this season and been like, that game right there is absolutely going to be in the top 5. But I think we may have one this week with the LA Chargers at less than a field goal, matching up against the Philadelphia Eagles, a team who last week against the Detroit Lions, who made the top 5. We went back and forth between the differences between those two teams. But the Chargers now at 1.5, a team so many people love, a team that a lot of folks have rated a lot higher than probably numbers suggest they should, laying 1.5. Contest players love these small numbers against the Philadelphia Eagles team, which, I mean, they weren't getting support last week against the Lions in the contest. Market told a different story, but surely the Chargers at -1.5 are going to be a pick that gets more than 1,000 people on their side.
You had me at hello.
That's all the case that needs to be made. And a comment that came in last week, what does it mean when we're talking about 1,000 people? And so within the Circa Million contest, to get into the top 5, which we're picking, usually the benchmark there is 1,000 or more people, which represents just higher than a quarter of the contest, are going to have to pick the team. So when we go back and forth here and we're talking about 1,000 people, we're just trying to think in our heads, are we going to see 1,000 people picking this side? And case be made, Chargers -1.5, the first one in the top 5.
Yep. I buy that one.
All right. So now it gets a little bit more clouded, but I think there's a couple other ones. So I'll just sort of throw out a few here, see which way you're leaning, see which way you ultimately think. Another small favorite, the Cincinnati Bengals -2.5 against the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very attractive. I think people are seeing Cleveland fall apart a little bit. There's just all week long, it's just disruption after disruption, and the Mayfield doesn't seem to be right. They just seem to be imploding slightly. And I think Cincinnati coming off that bad game, I think people will think they will rebound. So, yeah, I think that's a likely candidate for the top 5. I'll vote that in.
Mayfield dealing with the shoulder injury. Odell Beckham apparently just excused from the team this week. They're not letting him practice. It seems like that's all but done. and then you have multiple injuries elsewhere on the field. Looking at a very small number here, less than the 3. I'm with you. We'll put Cincinnati on the side, a team that has got a ton of support in the contest week after week after week. The Las Vegas Raiders, they're on the road this week at the New York Giants, laying the field goal. There's the unfortunate situation going on with Ruggs and everything that happened there, causing a bit of potential internal distraction for the Raiders, rightfully so. When we're looking at Las Vegas laying 3 on the road at the Giants, a team that everyone saw put up a decent fight against Kansas City on Monday Night Football, but ultimately come up short. Is this a number that is going to get more than 1,000 people back in the Raiders?
It could. Let's put that as in the Buffalo category.
Putting that one on the fringe. Okay. One more of these sort of smaller favorites that I'll throw at you here. And this one has a little bit of uncertainty, but I think it can go back and forth. We're waiting on a very important announcement regarding Kyler Murray and his ultimate status, but we're seeing the Cardinals in the contest -1 at San Francisco. This is obviously very difficult because we're doing this Thursday morning. The lines came out 5 minutes ago, and we're trying to sort of estimate what's going to happen with uncertainties Friday and Saturday. But how do you think about this game from a contest perspective right now? Because if he's in, this number is going to go back up within the market, and that's obviously going to be appealing to people looking at this, getting extra value likely around the field goal. If he's out, this may swing back through the 0. 49ers likely go off as favorites. How are you looking at this from a contest perspective?
Yeah, I was shocked to see the popularity when I looked at the betting percentages, because I haven't heard anybody advocated Arizona all week long anywhere. This is the most one-sided game I'm hearing through all the media outlets that I listen to. And, for good reason. We don't know Murray. Hopkins isn't practicing. AJ Green is on COVID. We've got Kittle supposedly on track to come back. You've got the revenge spot from the first game when the door was shut down on them at the goal line and they lost. Every single thing you could just, it's a toilet roll of reasons to take San Francisco, and yet there keeps coming Arizona money. I guess it's from the public keeping it up. I don't know, but it seems like all the sharps are in love with San Francisco.
And so when we're talking about, again, this is where I think it's been difficult for me, right, is we see one thing happening in the market, but this group of 4,000 contest players is really what we're trying to judge and hone in on. And I think when we're looking at it as a whole, are largely influenced by a lot of the same media shows and spots that we listen to and people that we follow and people that put bets out, and some of the same numbers and information tends to be valued very highly on a week-to-week basis within the contest, which I guess when we're looking at this, and I'm obviously hearing and seeing the same things you are, if the status for Murray does not improve and we're getting a situation where Hopkins is less than 100%, if he goes, he's a very tough guy, misses practice a lot, still plays, not going to have AJ Green out there. Is this a spot where that sort of mainstream media, or we'll call it even just isolated sports betting media, all advocating for San Francisco, even with this number less than it was when a lot of those people were betting it? Is this a spot where, like Minnesota last week, who became one of the most popular picks, do we see the same with San Francisco?
Yeah, I think there'd be a flood of San Francisco. I think as more people listen to the podcasts that are coming out, and they actually start paying attention to what the prognosticators are picking, it's going to start swaying the pendulum the other way, regardless if Murray plays or not. I don't know whether we even touch the game, quite frankly. It seems like it could end up being one of those 50-50 games. But I think San Francisco is going to end up on there some way, somehow, but it's a tough call.
We've seen Monday night games make the top 5 fairly often this season. We're getting a bit of a divide between the two teams playing on Monday night, between the Bears, who are going one direction, and the Steelers, who are seemingly going another. Pittsburgh laying less than a touchdown at home. Is there enough interest in either of these teams, specifically the Steelers, to get 1,000+ people on side of the home favorite on Monday Night Football?
Well, I think you've got two games in the identical category, and that's the Saints, Atlanta, and Pittsburgh, Chicago. You've got two great teams. I think people feel confident that those teams are going to win, but their offenses are so anemic that the points become very enticing. And I don't think a lot of people want to trust either Pittsburgh or the Saints to cover those numbers. So that's the issue that I see.
Is the difference between the two perhaps that we're not seeing Jameis with the Saints, which may devalue them more than the Steelers, who do have most of their usual weapons available on both sides of the football, lost Ingram in a trade, and they do have some offensive injuries at skill position players, but still have Ben, still have Harris. Is there a case to be made for Pittsburgh, though, at 6.5, just considering how bad the Bears have been? I know that the Falcons have put together some efforts recently, but like the Bears have been out of it on a weekly basis against elite competition.
They have been out of it. And I would probably, for me, I would probably just leave it alone.
Staying away from both.
I would just leave it alone. I don't want to gravitate toward counting on, because it just reminds you of the Pittsburgh-Washington game from last year when,
painful.
I think people remember Pittsburgh just had so many instances of horrible offense. It doesn't matter. You think Fields can, break away and do something here and there and keep the game tighter. And if Max, back playing and Chicago's a little bit healthier, that keeps them in the game a little bit.
Another issue for a team at quarterback is absolutely the Carolina Panthers. Matt Rule came up just before we went on the air and said, we really don't know what the status of Sam Darnold is. And maybe that's a good thing, but I don't know if we can really expect much from PJ Walker, who I'm not sure why he's in the league. He was in the XFL for a reason. He's done some decent things in preseason, but we've seen glimpses of it so far this year in spots where Darnold was on the sideline getting some help. And it has just been, is gruesome the right word to put for it when it comes to offensive football for the Panthers? You get the Pats at 3.5 on the road. As you mentioned last week here in the show, we haven't seen players in the contest that scared or concerned about laying the 3.5 just because of how the league is kind of shaping up. We were talking about how the Pats really getting upgraded by a few people specifically that we know, but perhaps that's sort of permeating throughout the rest of the market and how we're looking at players within the contest. The Pats at 3.5 with Belichick against a young quarterback or a quarterback he's dominated in his time with the Jets. Did the Pats at 3.5 get some interest?
Yeah, I probably lean toward putting him in. It looks likely that McCaffrey's going to be in, but he's had a lot of false positives, so to speak. He's really having a tough time getting into the lineup. There's been a handful of times where, okay, is he going to be in? Is he going to be in? And we keep on getting teased. And if Darnold's in, it doesn't even matter who's quarterbacking the team. They may be better off with the backup, frankly. So one way or another, Carolina's still a dog with fleas, and New England's firing on cylinders right now.
Dog with fleas is probably generous to describe either Sam Darnold or the Panthers offense at the time. When the coach comes out, Matt Rule was last week, early in the week. He came out and he's like, we're just going to have to get used to people looking at us as a defensive football team. If your head coach is saying that for a team that historically has not been great defensively, you have to go back to really 2015 to find any glimpse of that. Pretty jarring comments coming out of Carolina. So I think we'll put New England. I'm with you there that they're closer to in than on the fringe. And really, for the first time all season, we're working through a card pretty quickly here. Any of the remaining games, KC, Green Bay, Minnesota, Baltimore, Tennessee, and the Rams, with the absence of Henry, either of those stand out to you as something that might draw 1,000+ picks?
Did we get a 6 on Baltimore? I think Baltimore's definitely a fringe, and I think Green Bay might get some interest.
Really? Green Bay at 7.5?
They might.
Sell me on it. Sell me on it. What's the intrigue there?
Well, I'm not under the impression that Love is really as bad as everybody's saying he is. Is he really that bad?
Do we know?
I don't really know. The only times I've seen him play, he played at least passable. I haven't seen the guy, acting like a buffoon with the ball. He's got this is a team that just went into Arizona and did fine. They're healthier this week, other than the Rodgers situation. And hopefully they don't need another quarterback. And they signed Bortles today. But everybody is seeing how poorly Kansas City is playing. They're on a short week, and they probably didn't deserve to win the game. The Giants just gifted it with one penalty after another. There's something wrong with Mahomes. There's a lot of things wrong with Kansas City, and 7.5 is a lot of points.
So let me ask you two things here. The first thing is, how bad do you think collectively the football betting world believes Kansas City is? Is it really that dire in general for how people are looking at this team?
I think after the Giants' performance, I think that people are generally they're not an awful team. They've got the potential, but there's just too many problems.
Is the belief that they can fix it fading? Because I feel like that was very real at the start of the year, where we're like, just wait, like through the Baltimore game, through the Chargers game. It's like they'll figure it out. Has that gone away now that we're going into week 9 and they still haven't?
Did you see that interview with Andy Reid after the game Monday? I hadn't seen him recently, but he seems to have aged 5 years in a year. Just lost a lot of weight, shallow cheeks, and just despondent, and just seemed like a shell of the guy. Not that he was ever Mr. Personality, but it just kind of struck me. I'm like, oh, geez, I hope that guy's okay. And that translates to the players, and there's serious things wrong with that team.
He's very dejected, and I question how much of that comes from the unfortunate incidents with his son and all of that had happened in the off season, how much that's maybe weighing on him and the family behind the scenes. It's never really brought up in NFL media, and perhaps that's a good thing based on what happened. But I have to question how much that's maybe weighing on him, how much some of the Mahomes stuff with his mom and his brother and all of that he has to deal with is maybe coming in, but also the fact that like they're facing defenses that have no interest whatsoever of blitzing Mahomes, of conceding anything deep, and they're just forcing everything short and underneath the way they're setting these two high shells and how deep they're playing with their linebackers and their safeties. And we're used to KC being this big explosive offense, having those home run plays, and those aren't there. And you just feel like there's just, and they're almost, antsy's not the right word for it, but it's just like a frustrated vibe around the whole offense that they can't get any of those big plays. And they see what happens. Like we saw drives against the Giants, 7, 8, 9 plays over 5-6 minutes where they were running the football for chunk plays, play after play after play, but they just can't stick with it. There's like this need to have these big home runs. It's
very odd that they just get away from the game plan that's just working because they want to showboat or they want those big plays. They're addicted to them.
First drive of the game, they walk down the field taking these small passes, everything short in front, but they're letting guys get into space and make plays. And then you get inside the 5, and it's Travis Kelce snapping the ball behind his back to Mahomes, who lined up as a tight end, that leads to an interception. You're like, people would kill to be in that situation against 6, 7-man boxes. Run the football. You're inside the 5-yard line. It's okay to run when you're in the red zone and you're getting good looks. That's when you want to be running, and they're just not doing it. And so it's weird. But where I was going with this 2-part question is there's that opinion I think that people have about the Chiefs in the betting space and in the contest. And you've got that on one side. And then on the other side, there's the question of last week on Thursday Night Football, the Packers were 6.5-point favorites, or 6.5-point underdogs. I know you hate when I do this, but it matters. The Packers were 6.5-point dogs at Arizona without Devontae Adams. They had Aaron Rodgers, right? The Chiefs on Monday Night Football were 10-point favorites at home against the Giants. And now we're seeing the Packers without Rodgers, 7.5-point dogs at KC. Okay, so we're saying that the Packers without Rodgers is somewhere between the Packers with Rodgers and without Adams, and somewhere better than the Giants at full health. They had some receiver issues as the game went on. But whichever way you want to compare it, to me, neither one of those makes sense.
Well, what would the Green Bay would certainly be favored with their current lineup over the Giants this week.
You think the Packers without Rodgers, with Love under center, with this team we're expecting them to come with, would be favored over the Giants, essentially on a neutral, with the Giants at full health.
With what the Giants brought to the table last week, sure. Don't you?
I can't get to that. I don't think that's in play. I think Rodgers matters to this offense far more than we think.
You have Adams in the lineup, though. You didn't have Adams so you've got a little bit of a teeter-totter there with player changing.
Right, but like it's almost becoming trendy in a way to say like no skill position player, no quarterback, no anything is worth anything close to what it's being made out to be. Like I feel like that's becoming a trend to think about, and we saw it with Henry. We saw it with Von Miller, who I get the Miller that you get it. I get that one. But the Henry thing I think matters. We saw how much the Adams issue mattered within the market. And now we're trying to there's almost like a trendy argument that Rodgers isn't worth much. Are you buying that?
No, I think he's very valuable. I just don't think the Giants and Green Bay are that. I mean, I think Green Bay would be a 3-point favorite minimum.
Without Rodgers against the Giants.
With Adams playing, they're basically healthy, other than reasonably healthy otherwise. So, yeah, I think they'd be a 3-point favorite.
Okay. Is it fair to say we're putting this one on the fringe at best and moving on to the other games?
Just wanted to talk about it.
It's a great discussion. I think part of the value of the show is the discussion we have, especially when we disagree. We had comments, people saying, I wish you guys disagree more because it's interesting. But I think that's when it comes to evaluating the market and what we think about that game, what we just talked about, that's a very real conversation that should be had by every bettor.
I agree.
That really leaves us with that Baltimore-Minnesota game that you mentioned. Ravens at 6. We didn't really get into it. Everybody on Sunday Night Football from the Vikings, I believe they were the most picked at 1,400 people. It might have been first or second. Can't remember off the top of my head, but the Vikings were solely top 5. I think it's fair to say that anyone in the contest that picked them probably had their eyes on that game, watching it, as painful as it ultimately played out. But what from that game gives anyone within this contest or any bettors any confidence in Mike Zimmer and that Vikings team? I like, there's no way people are going back to Minnesota in this game. The question is, was what we saw in Sunday Night Football enough to switch it that much that now we're going to see people flocking to lay 6 with the Ravens?
I think potentially so. Minnesota is supposed to have that big home field advantage and did nothing. And they don't play as well on the road. And Baltimore basically was a big letdown last time out. They're coming out to bye, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Hey, they're supposed to regenerate it, and their defense is nice and solid usually. I think Baltimore can get the support here. They just one of those. It just seems like Baltimore is just going to want to take out its frustrations this week, doesn't it?
Yeah, that loss to Cincinnati was brutal, but we've seen a lot within the contest week to week where you get that big primetime performance or lack thereof, and that really influences the next week. And I think of all the games that stood out from week 8, that Vikings lack of performance at home against a backup quarterback without Dak and that market movement and how much that went, and they didn't cover any of the numbers anywhere.
No.
I think that carries over, and I'm with you that Baltimore at 6, I think, is worth talking about. So we've narrowed down the card here. Are we okay putting Baltimore in the top 5 with the Chargers? Because right now LA is the only team we have in the top 5 we've agreed on.
Yeah, we have Baltimore, Cincinnati,
Baltimore, Cincinnati, New England were the ones that we were kind of fringe confident on.
And Chargers.
And the Chargers. So if we're going with the ones we were like fringe confident on, we were very confident on the Chargers. That was locked in. We were confident on the Ravens. And then we were both leaning heavily Cincinnati and New England. You're good with both of those?
Yeah, we're good with those 4.
So there's the 4. And that leaves us with the 3 that were sitting on the fringe. And so if we're thinking about popularity of the game overall and which team might draw, again, more than 1,000 picks, the 3 we were sitting on were Buffalo, Las Vegas, and San Francisco. And we need to have one of those to round out the 5.
I think a lot of people are going to worry about the Ruggs situation with the Raiders and just want to sit it out. But then you've got this huge COVID issue with the Giants. Things can really blow up over the next 2 days with the Giants. So that's just really tough to. You really just have to kind of ignore that game, I think, with those situations.
That leaves us with Buffalo and San Francisco. You said San Francisco, and I'm with you, one of the most popular media mentions of the week when it comes to betting media. Buffalo, we were in agreement there too. I think everyone's looking at them as a top 2 or 3 team, and everyone's looking at the Jags as a bottom 2 to 3 team. It's a big number, but we saw last week people were willing to lay it.
I think I would lean more toward the Buffalo just because we're seeing a lot of support for Arizona, which is going to take away from any San Francisco push later on. There is no support for Jacksonville, so you can get pretty one. You just need to be one-sided.
Exactly
to have a shot at it.
So, Chargers, Ravens, Bengals, Patriots, Bills, and the caveat, let's call it, is if Murray is ruled out, then we believe that San Francisco would make the top 5 because that number is going to move, and it's a Minnesota situation.
And if the COVID issue and the Giants gets worse, then the Raiders would obviously pop up there.
So those are the 2 that we're sort of sitting on. We'll switch things up a little bit. Now we're on the million. We've wrapped it up. We've got to go with our highest selection. You are now in the lead as we go into week number 9. Last week was ugly, and you got away with it. That means I get to go first this week. Is that right?
No, you went first last week.
Okay, you set it up. So you get first pick. I think this week for the top pick is pretty easy. So you may take a 2-game lead here, but you go ahead and make
I already have a 2-game lead. It's 5-3.
It is 5-3. You're right. Okay. I'm fudging the numbers here. So 5-3. You can. I think you're going to get it to a 3-game.
No wonder you're 70% on your Twitter tracking.
Yeah, everything's a mirage.
Yeah, I got to go with those Chargers.
Yeah.
Go with those Chargers.
That's 100% who I would have gone with.
Sorry.
I think the only chance of something getting wild is if things in Carolina, if Darnold's ruled out, that shakes things up a little bit. Out of the other 2, I don't think Baltimore's. I mean, we're probably looking at 1,400 to 1,500 people. I think the Chargers get it.
If McCaffrey doesn't go, that line's going to bounce back up. That moved on McCaffrey news.
Yeah, the only thing that I'm trying to out of Baltimore, Cincinnati, New England, and Buffalo, I'm like, where can things get really weird? Nothing's gonna the Ravens are just going to be popular. The Bengals they're just going to be popular. Buffalo, maybe it goes to 17, but I don't think that's moving the number like a huge. They're just going to be up most. New England's the one of the 4 where we might get a ruling on Darnold. We might get a ruling on McCaffrey. That number might go up a bit, and that'll kind of draw people. So I think I have to go New England for my pick. I don't know if they'll ultimately be second, but they'll be in the top 5. But I think that's the only way that I can maybe challenge you with the Chargers, who I think are the runaway number 1 this week.
Okay.
So
I'm getting hungry.
I think you may have the 3-game lead on the steak dinner. When it comes to Survivor, it's been pretty easy to sort of spot the most pick side every single week so far this year. I don't know if there's much uncertainty when it comes to this week. It's just a question of, are people going to go ahead and use the Bills if they already haven't? But let's assume that that's going to be number 1. But if we want to make it interesting for viewers, we've kind of gone down a level and say which is going to be the number 2 most selected. You have an opinion on that?
Well, the Colts, I mean, if people haven't used the Colts, you're never going to get a better shot, right? Even though
so with it being the Thursday night game, we were saying the same thing about Cincinnati, Jacksonville. And that ended up being like the 4th or 5th most selected because it was a Thursday game. But that was like the perfect spot for Cincinnati. Is that the same thing that happens this week too? Would it just Thursday night kills some of the excitement?
I don't know why anybody there would care if they find a good situation for a Thursday game and they've got up to the date information. Why aren't they using the Thursday games? It's not like millions. So
you're saying, why would people care? 7 people last week didn't even make a pick. They didn't care to make a pick. That's been one of the most popular eliminations.
Well, I think one guy missed 5 or 6 of those by himself.
It's you say, why do people care? And there's an example of it. But I'm with you. If the Jets Colts game was on Sunday, it's 100% the most selected this week. Fair to say?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
And so it's a question of how much does Thursday ultimately take away. But I'm with you. I think we'll see the Bills obviously very popular. We'll see how popular this Thursday night game is between the Jets and the Colts. And then beyond that,
Kansas City. I mean, the wheels are coming off the bus there. It might not have too many good shots with them either.
No, that's very true. And just with that news of Rodgers, they're obviously catching a huge break, so that may ultimately be popular as well. But that'll wrap it up for us, NFL Week 9. We made it through pretty good here. I actually feel good coming out of the show about the potential for our top 5 consensus picks. We'll see how it ultimately does. Maybe we can finally get the elusive 4-1 or 5-0 week. I would love a 5-0. For LVC, I'm Adam Chernoff and Covers.com. This is the football betting contest countdown. We will see you guys back here for Week 10 next Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific time.